Hello. This is Antya from Byte Shuffle. Thank you for always watching my videos. It's been quite a while since the last deck explanation video, part 2. This time, I'd like to give a deck explanation for ANT following the release of Modern Horizons 3. I'll start with an explanation of the 2 Ad Nauseam version of ANT, then move on to the Burning Wish version, and finish with the Painter version I used at the end of the year. I covered the basics in the previous video, so I'll skip those in this one. If you'd like to check that out, I'll leave a link in the description and at the end of the video, so please take a look there. Now, let's get started. Since the release of Modern Horizons 3, these cards have been making an impact. Additionally, Grief, which was commonly used in Reanimator decks, has been banned. However, Reanimator continues to be at the top of the meta, standing alongside Eldrazi as one of the dominant forces. Next, tempo decks like UB Tempo follow, though they've fallen quite a bit behind. This is the current state of the metagame. ANT is a deck that wins by using the Storm mechanic. Due to the nature of the Storm keyword ability, using hand disruption allows you to reduce your own hand size, which can weaken the deck's overall potential. However, decks that force their own strategy and secure victory before the opponent can respond dominate the top of the meta. Therefore, as an ANT player, ideally, you'd want to be selective about when to cast hand disruption since it reduces your hand size. But, unfortunately, the current meta often doesn't allow for that flexibility. That's why starting with hand disruption is crucial, and after gauging the situation with your opponent, it's essential to quickly execute your combo. If your opponent casts Graveyard Hate, your reduced hand size will make it harder to recover, so previously, it was possible to ignore Graveyard Hate and build up Storm from an 8-card hand to win with Tendrils of Agony, but nowadays, if you don't properly deal with permanents, it has become much more difficult to secure a win. Additionally, with the Eldrazi army receiving significant boosts, decks across the meta have adapted, and as a result, Consign to Memory is everywhere. Consign to Memory can counter the Storm trigger of Tendrils of Agony. This can't be prevented by Veil of Summer. Therefore, as the ANT player, you must use hand disruption before casting your Storm spell to secure a victory. To cast hand disruption before going for the win, you either need to use Ad Nauseam to increase your hand size or make use of your graveyard with cards like Gia's Will or Past in Flames to extend your resources. Before casting your Storm spell, it's essential to use hand disruption. However, the meta is currently dominated by Reanimator and Eldrazi. As a result, graveyards are heavily targeted by these cards, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to make full use of the graveyard as planned. Additionally, Eldrazi's clock is extremely fast, making it often difficult to use Ad Nauseam to safely increase your hand size. I've been testing a build without Burning Wish for a while, but relying solely on Ad Nauseam has led to more situations where I can't close out the game. So, I considered switching to the Burning Wish build, aiming to have a way to increase my hand size even when my life total is low. By using Burning Wish to fetch Peer into the Abyss, you can increase your hand size even when your life total is low. Here's the Burning Wish list I've been testing and adjusting for a while. I've kept the targets for Burning Wish to a minimum, including only Beseech the Mirror, Peer into the Abyss, and Grapeshot. I focused on minimizing the drawbacks of a wish board, such as sideboard constraints and tempo loss. Since my deck building philosophy differs from the mainstream lists, I'd like to first review the general deck building approach before discussing my own list. The typical list is built with black as the core color. It focuses on casting hand disruption early in the game. The deck runs 8 tutors, ensuring you can draw into them without needing to rely heavily on draw manipulation. Since the goal is to cast hand disruption on turn 1, casting draw sources is typically planned for turns 2 to 3. As a result, due to the speed of the current meta, the number of draw sources you can cast becomes limited. leading to a typical build with 3 Ponder and 4 Brainstorm, for a total of 7 draw spells. In addition, the fetch lands used are carefully selected to easily fetch a swamp without any issues. Similarly, surveil lands that lean toward black are commonly included in these builds. Since it's a 4-color build, its resistance to wasteland is weakened. To counter wasteland, most builds include a total of 16 lands. Now that we've reviewed the deck building philosophy of typical lists, let's take a look at the list I'm currently using. Earlier, I mentioned that it's common for typical lists to include 7 draw spells. I also considered a list with 7 draw spells for a while, but I ultimately abandoned it because I lacked the right-hand power to make it work consistently. That's why I started building my deck with 8 draw spells, based around islands. Earlier, I mentioned that it's common for typical lists to run 8 tutors. My list is based around islands with 8 draw sources, and for balance, I run 7 tutors instead of the usual 8. Depending on the opening hand, I sometimes start with hand disruption, but since I often fetch islands, Vexing Bauble has become more important as a card that restricts my opponent's plays. I've chosen these 7 cards for the tutors. Next, I'd like to explain why Wishclaw Talisman was not included. If you only use Burning Wish to fetch Peer into the Abyss, if your opponent casts Veil of Summer, it will prevent you from securing the win. After increasing my hand size, I want to follow up with Burning Wish into Grapeshot to secure the win. I prioritized running 2 copies of Burning Wish in the deck. Due to space constraints, Wishclaw Talisman is not included in the deck. Next, considering the nature of a combo deck, I wanted to avoid drawing unnecessary lands, so I explored how much I could reduce the number of lands. Earlier, I mentioned that it's common to include 16 lands to counter wasteland, but this seems to be a drawback of the increased card power that comes with running more colors. Therefore, I built the deck with a Sultai colors base. I limited the red element to cards like Past in Flames and Burning Wish, and focused on seeing if I could keep the deck mostly within the 3 Sultai colors. My approach wasn't to run 16 lands to counter Wasteland, which would weaken the mana base, but rather to rework the deck structure to function within the 3 Sultai colors, and adjust the deck to make more effective use of basic lands. By utilizing basic lands, the deck gains more resilience against Wasteland, allowing it to function smoothly even with only 15 lands. Next, regarding the combination of fetch lands. Since the deck is built around blue, I run 8 fetch lands that can always fetch an island. By fetching an island first and then Bayou, you ensure that the Sultai colors are available, allowing the deck to function smoothly. When aiming to execute the combo early, I want quick access to Bayou, so it's included as one of the dual lands. As a result, by process of elimination, the Surveil land slot becomes blue-green. Since there's a bit more red in the deck, I'll consider including 1 red dual land and 1 red Surveil land as backup options. I'd prefer to include a red-black Surveil land, but due to the combination of fetch land colors, there are times when I can't fetch it, so I opted for a blue-red Surveil land that can be fetched easily with the 8 fetch lands I initially included. Next, regarding the combination of dual lands. When aiming to combo off early, I often need blue and black mana, so I included 1 Underground Sea. Since I might suddenly top deck Past in Flames or Burning Wish and need red mana, I included 1 Volcanic Island. With this, the 15 lands are set. Players often have differing opinions on cards like Vexing Bauble and Veil of Summer, so I'll provide my perspective on them. My rivals have gained access to cards like Psychic Frog, Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student, and others. These cards can serve as finishers while also providing ways to gain advantage. While other decks have gained powerful ways to generate advantage, ANT doesn't have such tools. Let's review the cards currently used in ANT once more. These cards become especially powerful when timed to counter your opponent's pitch spells. With Vexing Bauble, if your opponent doesn't have open mana, no matter how many pitch spells they have in hand, the subsequent pitch spells will all be neutralized. As for Veil of Summer, casting it in response to your opponent's counterspell. After your opponent uses 2 cards to counter, you get to draw an additional card. This effectively puts you in a situation where you've gained a 2-card advantage. Therefore, these cards can be seen as a way for ANT to gain advantage. You might think that, as a means of gaining advantage, these cards should be included as 4 OFS, but I'll explain the reasoning behind that later. To put it simply, while we would ideally want to run 4 copies, the current meta doesn't suit that, so we've adjusted the number accordingly. Next, regarding the combo trigger point, there's no difference from the standard lists, so I'll skip over that part. Similarly, for discard spells, there's no difference from the standard lists, so I'll skip over that as well. As for mana acceleration, there's no difference from the standard lists either, so I'll skip over that as well. With this, the 60 cards in the main board are finalized. As I mentioned earlier, both Vexing Bauble and Veil of Summer serve as ways for ANT to gain advantage. Now, let me explain the reason why we don't include 4 copies of these cards. By casting Vexing Bauble, and your opponent responds with Force of Will. In response, you cast Veil of Summer. Then, your opponent further responds with Force of Negation. At this point, you've gained a 2-card advantage. Being able to use the cards in this way is incredibly powerful. However, the meta is flooded with consign to memory, and it's common for opponents to sideboard in up to 4 copies after game 1. As a result, your Vexing Bauble into Veil of Summer play gets ignored, leaving your storm spells vulnerable to disruption. By holding multiple consign to memory, opponents increasingly target the triggers of storm spells more effectively. That's why I decided to use a new version of ANT at the year-end event. The key feature of this list lies in this part of the sideboard. For convenience, we'll refer to this version as Painter. This idea was actually shared with me by a friend, so it's not originally my own. I'll include their Twitter account in the description, so feel free to give them a follow. Let's go back to the earlier scenario. We're at the point where Vexing Bauble is on the battlefield, and you've just cast Veil of Summer. Your opponent is eagerly waiting, holding consign to memory, ready to specifically target Tendrils of Agony. In response, you cast Painter's Servant, naming black as the chosen color. As a result, Painter's Servant enters the battlefield without being countered, thanks to the protection from Veil of Summer. Next, you cast Grindstone and activate its ability. Since the Painter combo relies on an activated ability, it cannot be stopped by consign to memory, allowing you to secure the win. Additionally, let's say you had already played Painter's Servant earlier, naming black as the chosen color. In that case, all cards become colored, meaning you can nullify the effect of consign to memory that counters colorless spells. A concern when Painter's Servant is already on the battlefield is that it becomes a target for your opponent's removal spells. However, since you've named black as the color, you can protect it with Veil of Summer, avoiding the removal. Let me share some additional benefits as well. Eldrazi Temple and Eye of Ugin only provide benefits for colorless Eldrazi spells. On our turn 1, with Dark Ritual, we can deploy the Painter package. This allows us to bypass threats like Thought-Knot Seer and Chalice of the Void. After deploying the Painter package, if we're short on mana, we can cast Lion's Eye Diamond or Cabal Ritual on the following turn to secure the win. The Painter package requires a total of 6 mana from setup to combo activation. With Veil of Summer included, it completes at a total of 7 mana. If one part of the Painter package is missing, you can use Infernal Tutor to search for the missing piece, allowing the Painter combo to complete for a total of 8 mana. Now, let's briefly go over the sideboarding strategy. Start by bringing in the entire Painter package. As for the cards to side out, generally, it will be around this area. The key is not to fully commit to the Painter combo, but to leave the minimum necessary cards for the Storm plan as well. Depending on the opponent's deck, you may also add additional answers to permanents, starting with Abrupt Decay. As for the single Wishclaw Talisman in the main board, It synergizes with both the Painter combo and the Storm combo, and is included as a bridging card between the two strategies. Next, let's review the weaknesses of the Painter build. Painter's Servant is vulnerable to cards like Dress Down or Doorkeeper Thrall being preemptively played, which can prevent you from naming a color. Additionally, if the opponent has Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn in their deck, it prevents you from achieving victory. Against these opponents, start by using discard spells, and then aim to win through the Storm plan. Therefore, additional discard spells are included in the sideboard. When it comes to decks that use these types of cards, Stiflenot is at the top of the list. This deck employs a mana denial strategy, so we counter their mana denial strategy with Forest and Carpet of Flowers. Next, let's cover decks that pose a blind spot for the Painter combo. That deck is Mono Red Prison. This deck includes creatures such as these, which are capable of dealing with Painter's Servant. Therefore, it's essential to aim for victory through the Storm plan. Accordingly, make sure to include a solid number of cards that can handle their permanents. Since the Painter package takes up sideboard space, we're running 2 copies of Boseiju, who endures in the main board. We want to keep lands to a minimum, so only one Surveil land is included due to space constraints. This concludes the explanation of the Painter build. I had prepared the video up to this point, but with the ban announcement on December 17th, Psychic Frog and Vexing Bauble have been banned. Therefore, I'll provide some additional commentary. As a replacement for Vexing Bauble, I've increased the number of Thoughtseize and Duress. This is because no cards were banned from Eldrazi, so I expect the consign to memory meta to continue. Next, I added Reign of Filth as additional mana acceleration that doesn't rely on the graveyard. In a list with 4 hand disruption spells, 3 Veil of Summer, and 3 Vexing Bauble, having 10 disruption cards felt a bit excessive. Some might still find 9 disruption cards excessive, but since the plan is to shift to the Painter configuration, I've opted for 9 disruption spells in the mainboard to free up space in the sideboard. With the freed up slots, I added extra copies of Chrome Mox. Due to the timing of the ban announcement, the videos for a while will feature gameplay where Vexing Bauble is still legal. I'll gradually release updated videos as adjustments are made. This time, we'll wrap up with the general overview, but please check out the detailed analyses if you're interested. Thank you for watching up to this point. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a thumbs up. See you in the next one. This has been Antya.